Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Very warm welcome to the exchange and to the launch of the 2021 Birmingham Economic Review. Welcome to those in the room and welcome to those who are joining us online. For those of you joining us online, you've missed out on the vacant roles, you've missed out on the spectacular banking hall, but it's great that you're with us. I'm David Eastwood, I'm the Vice Chancellor of the University of Birmingham. And I want to do two things really. Just say a little bit about the building we're in, because it's still new to the university, and then just say a little bit about the university's commitment to the city and to the region. This building is the old municipal bank. It was acquired by the university from the City Council 4 years ago. When I look back on it, it was a sort of speculative purchase because the building had been occupied for 25 years, it had been vandalised, and it clearly needed quite a lot of money spent on it. But it is a spectacular building, it's one of Birmingham's great buildings, and it's here in the heart of the city. Why did we buy it and why did we restore it? Two reasons. One, as the University of Birmingham, founded in this city, by this city as the first civic university, we wanted to put some of our activities and the facility right at the heart of the city, and what better venue than this. And secondly, we wanted to put a series of activities in this building, City West Midlands Ready being one of them, activities which we, the university, run in partnership with the city and the region. We also wanted a space which was open to the public, where the university could interact with the public, and the banking hall down below is a public space. There'll be mums and toddlers in there quite shortly. There will be people from businesses and from the institutions of the city who are working and having their coffee there. It's a great space. And also, it's a space where we can share some of the research activities and research challenges of the university. So if you wander around, you'll see a display at the moment around the air that we breathe. That links actually to our sponsorship of the Queen's Baton Relay for the Commonwealth Games out there at the moment, going around the world with an air quality sensor, beaming back data on air quality wherever the Queen's Baton is. So you can see how all of these things link together. So please do use this space. As I say, downstairs is public space, it's open space. Here on the second floor, this is bookable space, as this morning already. I think this is a building which is becoming part of the fabric of the city. The second thing I wanted to say was just something about the university's commitments to the city and to the region. Some of you may know that I'm finally retiring after nearly 13 years at the end of December. And one of the things we've been trying to do on my watch is clearly to re-establish the University of Birmingham as a civic university, as part of the fabric of the city and the region. And one particularly important move in that was the establishment, first of City Ready, now City Ready and West Midlands Ready, to provide the kind of analysis, provide the kind of thinking which was so necessary to both to the prosperity of the city and the region, and to enabling us better to address issues of dislocation, issues of disadvantage in our region. And you'll be hearing from him soon, but my colleague Sam Collinson has led City and West Midlands Ready from the beginning, and very much it's been framed by him, and I wanted publicly, before I step down, to pay tribute to Simon's critically important leadership. It was rumoured once that W.G. Grace, the great cricketer, was given out in the 4th ball of the first over, and he refused to walk, and he said to the umpire, "My good man, these people have come here to watch me play cricket, not you umpire. You come here to listen to the launch of the Birmingham Economic Review 2021, so I will cede the stage to Simon." Thank you very much.
Thanks. Thank you very much today. Some kind words there. And let me just add to his welcome. Good morning to everyone. Last year we had the Birmingham Economic Review virtually. It's wonderful to be physically in the room with you, to host you, give you some breakfast if you're not online, but also, again, to reiterate, to welcome you to this wonderful building. We're hugely proud, actually, of how we've transformed this historic building in the centre of the city. What I'm going to do is provide a very quick snapshot of a very large report. And I'm going to jump straight in before we move on to the panel. I will thank a lot of colleagues who really wrote it and were fundamentally critical to putting together all the data and all the analysis at the end of what I'm going to say. But this is the 6th time we've done this, 6th annual report. And again, we partnered with the absolutely excellent Greater Birmingham Chamber of Commerce, and we're so pleased to work with them on this occasion again. And the focus is an obvious one this year. It's been not just an uncertain, but an unprecedented year of challenges, both economically, but for businesses and socially, and for individuals. And we simply focus in this Birmingham Economic Review on the challenges of the impacts of the pandemic, specifically on this region, and look at the prospects for growth, for recovery, in terms of not just improving the region's competitiveness, our productivity, and growing firms larger, but actually to understand how we can make it greener and cleaner and fairer and more equal as a regional economy. So on the slide in front of you, we can see some of the main sections of the summary report. You should have copies of those if you're physically in the room with us, because we do have a virtual audience. Note that the actual full report is 5 chapters and is about 140 pages. So when you see quotes from key individuals or stakeholders from the private and public sector, they have written sections of this report with us. So there's a lot more, and it's available, accessible on the Chamber website after this event. And I invite you to delve into the detail a bit more. But again, let me jump straight in. I want to try and present a bit of a picture about a transition looking back through a very challenging period and looking ahead into the future. And pre-pandemic, the region was growing really strongly. We had some significant momentum. We had higher levels of unemployment and lower levels of skills, but both of those metrics were improving in 2019. And in 2019, we were experiencing about an average of 6.1% increase in GVA per capita, that's productivity per head rate of growth. And it's really pretty good. We were the 2nd best performing region in 2019 after London for inward investment, and particularly foreign direct investment. We were an attractive and an increasingly attractive place to do business. The pandemic hit this region almost the worst across all UK regions. And the UK, if you haven't seen this already, has been hit harder than most OECD countries in terms of the economic hit. Productivity in the region fell by 13% in 2020, more than any other region in the UK. And it's unlikely to recover till the end of 2022, potentially even into 23. That's a challenging number. Footfall in Birmingham city centre dropped 46% in the 12 months to June 2021. And that's one of the factors, and there are a number of factors here, but that's one of the factors accounting for very high furlough rates and some of the highest unemployment rates increases of any region in the country. So at the peak, there were 46,000 redundancies, new redundancies. This is between September and November 2020. So when I come and talk about the social impact that's driven by the economic impact that's driven by a health pandemic, youth unemployment is also a particular challenge now. About 13.8% of 18 to 24-year-olds were unemployed in Birmingham in 2020. That's significantly above the English average of 8.6%. We have a very young, very diverse population, but a lot of them are unemployed at this point. However, there is good news here. Inward investment stayed very strong during the pandemic. In fact, it dropped a lot less than the UK average. And business optimism, interesting, because we follow the PMI, the NatWest PMI, and we've presented this at the Mayor's EIG every couple of weeks. And the PMI shows that future optimism for growth in business amongst businesses in the region is really, really excellent. So if you see this transition and we look ahead, in a sense, we're not post-pandemic. There is huge uncertainty. There are massive challenges, including health challenges. But we do need to look ahead to preparing ourselves for a strong recovery. And I think one of the challenges here for everybody, and this is the case for us looking at data and analysis, is to understand how many of the challenges and changes, and how many of these opportunities are actually short-term shifts that will go away, and how many are really fundamental long-term changes that we have to adapt fundamentally our business models to cope with. And if we take just one example, hybrid home office working, how that plays out, how many people go in for how often to city centre offices will have a tremendous impact on the volume of footfall in city centres. It'll have a tremendous impact on small businesses that thrive in the service sector and retailing off that footfall. So it'll have a knock-on effect to a whole range of metrics, from the transport infrastructure, property values, and ultimately where firms come to set up their businesses. So not just what investment decisions, but where that investment goes to. So the question is, for businesses, how much are they temporarily adjusting for short-term changes versus fundamentally long-term changes in what they have to do? Finally on this slide, there are some tremendous opportunities for the region, and we know this, and these are actually unique. If you take HS2 and the Commonwealth Games, CWG 22, just for examples, these could be and absolutely should be very strong catalysts for long-term growth. But you have to focus on those long-term gains. There's going to be a short-term boost in footfall, clearly, and this is numbers. There's going to be huge construction investment, and property development prices will rise as a result of HS2. But these are temporary periods. What we need to do is use those illustrations, those events, to effectively grow our reputation, grow our brand as a place to do business in, people to do business with. But we also have to promote longer-term investment in innovation clusters around construction, around creative and cultural industries, and a range of other things that are growth industries, to put ourselves on the map through those temporary events as long-term places to do business in those areas. And that's a key, I think, a challenge for us, shifting from the short term to the long term. So in terms of future growth, and we focus in the Birmingham Economic Review, as we do at City Ready in all our analysis, again, on different growth pathways. Where is a place going to go? And how can you nudge it and influence through policy, through funding, through precise investments, that growth pathway? And I said earlier, in this challenging period, we absolutely want to improve competitiveness. We want to produce wealth, be more prosperous, but the region really does need to become greener. It needs to become cleaner, and we've got excellent technologies and innovation to support that. It also needs to become much more inclusive and fairer. So whether you call it inclusive growth or levelling up, we have to do it better, and we have to do it over the long term. So on the matrix, very simple matrix, putting those two things, economic growth and socioeconomic equality, against each other. Box 3 is the worst of all worlds. That's a no growth, reduced opportunities for low income groups scenario, and we don't want to do that. Some regions globally, research shows this, get locked into a low skills, low income equilibrium for fairly long periods of their history. We were breaking out of this quite strongly pre-pandemic, and we need to get back that momentum. Box 2 here is the ideal. High growth, but fairer distribution of that growth, bringing disadvantaged communities, low skilled, low income individuals into the workforce. A key point that we try and make in this report is that upskilling and reskilling are absolutely critical to doing both those things. We need new skills, we need better skills, we need different skills, because the world of business is changing. But by upskilling an individual from a low-income household, we improve the ability of that household to earn income, be resilient, and move itself out of poverty. It does both things. It does inclusivity and it does prosperity. So let me just give you, as a sort of final point here, very slightly deep dive. There's time to get into a lot of the details, but as one illustration, very brief specific example, there are massive opportunities for us in the digital economy. There are also massive challenges for us and nationally. This region in particular, in this particular space. So digital businesses have the potential to add 2.7 billion of economic growth and 52,000 jobs in 4 years in this region. But only if the digital skills are available to meet the demand of firms that need them. And that includes existing firms. It means firms that will grow on the wave of digital services. Current predictions show a national digital skill shortfall of 5 million workers by 2030. This is a McKinsey study done for the Industrial Strategy Council, led by Andy Haldane. So aggressive upskilling and reskilling are really needed to meet the demands of firms as they transition into these new businesses. By 2040, a different study shows the West Midlands will see a potential drop of 40% in manufacturing employment. 40% fall in employment. Manufacturing is going to grow and be stronger, but not in employment terms. It'll employ fewer people to do more stuff. But we see a 20% growth and over for professional and scientific services, technical skills, and particularly life sciences and health. Life sciences and health already employ more people in this region than manufacturing. So supporting that rapid skills transition is key to helping firms compete, building these new businesses and supporting inclusive growth. And this is critical. And I think when we come to the panel in just a second, we'll see that our region is really starting to get its head around. There are some great initiatives up and running and being developed on reskilling the population. So let me step back. This is a testing time. It's a testing time for individuals, businesses represented in the room, but also for the region. It's a test of our agility. It's a test of our ability to adapt and to establish these new growth paths for our businesses. What I hope is that some of the insights, the data, the analysis, the commentary that we've got in the Birmingham Economic Review this year round can help regional stakeholders, businesses to get through this and reach that aspirational future that we share for the region. So do get a chance to read it fully if you can. As I say, the full report, 140 pages, 5 chapters, full commentaries from our stakeholders and guests, speakers, are all in that full version, and it's available online through the Chamber of Commerce website. I just want to finish by thanking a few people. We will, by the way, also are putting up at City Ready some interactive dashboards. So all the data in there you'll be able to play with online through our interactive dashboards. Just finally, though, to thank a few people. This is a huge effort. It's a year-round effort. I do want to thank the Chamber. I want to thank Emily Stubbs in particular, who's sitting at the front here. Henrietta is at the back. They are fantastic partners, and they've done a wonderful job again this year for doing this. And the City Ready team, in this case led by Kelvin Humphreys over there, wonderful job of putting together the actual content and the narrative. I did very little. I stand up and front it, but the work is done by these great people in my teams, and I appreciate that. So thank you very much. I'm going to step down now, and we're going to hand over to Hannah. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Simon, for the excellent summary of, as you say, a very lengthy report. My name is Steve Allen. I'm the president of the Greater Birmingham Chambers of Commerce and head of the Birmingham office of Mills and Reeve. And I've been asked to chair our panel this morning. So let's kick off and let me introduce members of the panel. First of all, we have Deborah Cadman, OBE, who is Chief Executive of Birmingham City Council. Deborah became Chief Executive of the Birmingham City Council in June 2021, following over 30 years in public services. Previous senior roles included Chief Executives of the YMCA, Head of Policy at Redcar and Cleveland Borough Council, and local government advisor to the ministerial team at the Department of the Environment, Transport and the Regions. Deborah was born and bred in Birmingham, attended the University of Birmingham. Deborah has a degree in politics, as well as a master's degree in economics and a further master's degree in management practice. Next, we have Surin Thiru, Head of Economics at the British Chambers of Commerce. With a wide-ranging background in economics, Surin oversees the British Chambers of Commerce economic thought leadership work and is a regular commentator on the UK economy, featuring regularly on television and radio and in the national press. He also leads on the BCC's policy work on access to finance and tax. He also contributes to the BCC's policy ideas for economic growth and government spending. And prior to BCC, he spent over 5 years as an economist at Lloyds Banking Group. Next, Abigail Broomfield is a fellow of TPI at Arup, Director, Midlands Planning and Economics Leader. Abigail is a qualified town planner and mediator with a mix of public and private sector experience. She currently manages the planning, economics and stakeholder engagement teams for Arup Midlands and has worked with Birmingham City Council for over 4 years on major infrastructure and growth projects. In addition, she leads on key regional growth projects, including Commonwealth Games Host City Programme, HS2 East Midlands, Delivery Corporation Advice, and the UK Central Hub Growth and Infrastructure Plan. And she was seconded to the Cabinet Office Implementation Unit for the Prime Minister in 2015-16, advising on improving the implementation of housing, infrastructure and development related policies. So I'm sure you're looking forward to hearing from our panelists today. So we've already met Simon, so let's just kick off and just ask you for your comments on the report. Deborah.
Yep. Oh, if you don't mind. So I think, Steve, you actually said that I work for the YMCA, and let me say, for the last 18 months, you did feel like we were doing very complicated dance. Can I thank you, Simon, for the presentation of the work City Ready producing this, and I think it very much sets a good context for what we've been thinking about as a council, but also some of the big challenges that we all collectively need to respond to. I also want to thank the Chamber, and particularly for not only hosting this event and publishing the economic review, but all the work that you did throughout COVID. And Henrietta and Bex, actually, I can recall the complete hysteria when we were in the vortex of COVID. But the thing that kind of kept the business community connected and engaged and informed was the convening group that the Mayor brought together throughout COVID, and having the very safe pair of hands of both City Ready, the very calm voice of Simon coming through the ether, and the ability of the Chamber to bring businesses to the table was absolutely essential. So thank you for that. I'm going to pick up a few points that you made, Simon. So clearly we're still facing the impacts of COVID, and the city is amongst those that have been hardest hit in the country by COVID. And the lives and livelihoods that have been lost means that we still have many grieving families in the city, and we are still experiencing deep long-term impacts. And that includes the mental health of some of our communities, but also more worryingly, the mental health of some of our young people as well. And I'm sure that there will still be impacts that are yet to emerge. So COVID has also exacerbated the inequalities, and you touched upon that, Simon, in your introduction. And, you know, we are still experiencing the most unacceptable difference in life expectancy in the city. So if you live in one part of the city, you can expect to live 10 years longer than someone who lives in a different part. And that clearly is not right. It clearly, from an economic point of view, it's not right, but from a moral point of view, it's absolutely not right. So we know that many businesses as well have had a tough time. A drop in footfall in our city centre has been significant, and we're still yet to regain the footfall that we experienced two years ago. So we also know that regional GVA dropped by 30% in 2020, and it's not expected to recover until next year. So that is a real challenge for us all in this room. We also have to be mindful of this backdrop and what we can do and should do as a council, and we're being very thoughtful about that and the role that we can play in supporting and encouraging businesses and the economy to improve. But again, as a city council, we're part of this team that are experiencing difficulties. Our income is dropped, but we're experiencing a massive rise in demand for our statutory services. So there are grand challenges that the city are facing, which I won't go through in detail, but suffice to say, one of the big challenges is ensuring our young people are skilled appropriately and they don't become a lost generation. And Simon touched upon that, and we are doing a significant amount, with many of you in the room actually, to try and compensate for that. Because, you know, our young people need to have a stake in the future in this economy and in this city. So I don't want to be doom and gloom, and I'm not going to repeat the stats that Simon has just shared with you, but I do want us to be clear about the huge opportunities that this city is experiencing and will continue to experience. So we are a global city, and the fact that we are host to the Commonwealth Games and the fact that the University of Birmingham is the main sponsor of the Games means that this is the Games of the future. The fact that we are putting education and skills at the heart of legacy as a result of those 11 days of sporting activity. And literally the eyes of the world will be on us next year, which is a little bit scary, but it's exciting, and it gives us the great opportunity to capture everything that means for us as a city. We are one of the most diverse cities outside London. It's our strength, but it also means that we have real connections into the broader world. And we also have a diverse and strong business community, and whilst it has been hell for the last 18 months, 2 years, we are seeing real resilience in our economy again. And Simon touched upon High Speed 2, and I don't know what I'm going to talk about when High Speed 2 finally comes to this city, but what I would say is the impacts of High Speed 2 have already had an impact on this economy and will continue to have an impact on this economy. And it's not just about the train, it's a lot more than that. And we're using it as a catalyst to improve parts of the city that is ripe for development. So if any of you go to Curzon Street, wander around Digbeth, look at that corridor from Millennium Point all the way through to Smithfield, you can get a palpable sense of excitement and creativity and growth. And we want to capitalise on that. And that has been predominantly because that train will dock in on Curzon Street in our city. So there are, you know, we're absolutely clear that the Commonwealth Games will kickstart a decade, golden decade of opportunities. And those of you who've heard the leader, Ian Ward, talk recently, he will be talking, he has spoken and will continue to talk about the golden decade of opportunities for our city. So the mission of the council is about making this happening and enabling you as business representatives and business owners, our citizens and every organisation to be part of that golden opportunity. And there are some things as a council I just want to touch on to just demonstrate how we're supporting the economy. So we're taking forward a transformation programme internally in the council, and we need to meet the challenges, and we need to deliver not just okay services, but we need to deliver brilliant services to meet the needs of you as businesses, but also more importantly, the needs of our residents. And I'm absolutely clear for Birmingham City Council, good enough is absolutely not good enough. Some people in the council are really excited about that mission, others are a little bit anxious. But it's also about being better equipped to deal with some of the unexpected challenges like COVID. And it's about leveraging our size, but it's also about acknowledging that we are the 20th largest landowner in the country. With that comes great responsibilities, but it also means we have the most amazing opportunity to leverage against that asset base and that value. We haven't done it as well as we need to, but certainly in the future that's going to change. And we want to use that value to reinvest in supporting you as businesses and supporting our communities. And the new investment prospectus is about encouraging businesses to come to our city and invest. And those of you that were at a recent event where the three cities spoke, you will have heard a colleague of mine, Martin, talking about Birmingham being hot. And what I think he meant by that is that we are very attractive to investors. And we hosted a visit from 20 of the largest global investors a few weeks ago. And let me tell you, there are people knocking on the door to be part of this golden decade of opportunities. But we are being really thoughtful about that. So we don't just want investment for investment's sake. We want people to join us on a strategic long-term journey and invest in the right things in the right way in this city. And it might mean that we have to make a brave decision to say no to some of the investment if we don't think it's the right investment. So the government's talked a lot about levelling up, and there's much debate about what that means. And again, those of you that have heard me talk of, I'm really chilled about ambiguity, because if the rules aren't written, it means that you've got an opportunity to write them yourself. And I think the fact that there is ambiguity about levelling up means that Birmingham can be absolutely clear about what it needs to do in order to level up. And Simon mentioned the need to skill our people up from low-income families and the potential impact that has on social mobility and the positive contribution that makes to economic growth. So we're working with many of you in this room to define what levelling up means for Birmingham, but more importantly, what we think we need to do in order to achieve that levelling up of this city with its people and its places. And I want Birmingham's levelling up plan to be slightly different. So everybody is talking about infrastructure, everybody's talking about housing, and that is vitally important. The physical levelling up of this city is absolutely vital. But you can't level up a city by simply building a road or building a bridge. You can't do that. So it's got to also be about how we level up our people and our communities as well. So we're looking at a new way of intervening early about preventing people defaulting into need for high-cost statutory services. And that's a really important and exciting bit of our levelling up plan. We want to do it differently. We don't want to go cap in hand to the government saying give us money, but we do want to work with you, and there will be many in this room that we will want to work with, to understand how we can do that in a way in which we can use our own asset base, our own value to kind of fund that early intervention and prevention. So I'm going to finish now. Hopefully I haven't taken more than the 10 minutes allotted. And I just want to talk a little bit about Be Bold, Be Birmingham, which, and I'm sure several of you have seen the branding around the city. And it's not just fancy banners. Actually, it is about having that narrative about the city. So it's predominantly for the Commonwealth Games, but actually it's got to be more enduring than that. It's got to be about cementing Birmingham as its position as a thriving, young and culturally diverse global city. And we truly believe we're the beating heart of the UK, both commercially and culturally and economically. We also think it's got to be about a place where everyone is included in the opportunities that the city can offer. And it's a place where we can look back at our heritage with a sense of pride, but also look forward with a sense of optimism and build a recovery from COVID that enables our economy to be stronger, greener, and far more inclusive. Thank you.
Thank you, Deborah. Suren, do you want to do some introductory comments for us?
Yes, thank you. And first of all, thank you for the report. I think it's a really interesting report, Simon, and I'd commend everyone who was involved in it. Often with a lot of noise on economic data over the last couple of years, it's good to have a report that's really insightful and cuts through all the noise. And I've also seen it's 6 years old. You picked quite an interesting period with both Brexit and then COVID. We'll be talking about it. So again, it's a really crucial report. So I thought I'd use my time slot to give you a bit of a sense of the national picture, what we're hearing from Chambers of Commerce across the UK about the recovery, and also some of the challenges and some of the things that were pointed out in the report. And I think that there was a lot of heading for me in the report, because a lot of what you've been saying through the report, through the recovery, some of the challenges, so what we're also seeing at a national level as well and across the country. our own quarterly economic survey, which is the largest independent survey in the UK, which accumulates all the local Chambers of Commerce survey data, including from Birmingham. And that gives us a real interesting picture of what is happening across the UK. And that is showing good news in the sense that the economy is recovering across the UK, but it's also highlighting some challenges. So on the good side, we are seeing domestic sales and activity improving, which is good. For example, for the service sector, domestic sales at its highest level of about 6 years, which again is a good sign of recovery. But what we're also seeing is some of the challenges you mentioned. So higher prices that are coming through in terms of inflation, the expectation around price increases at its highest level on record in our own survey data. Recruitment difficulties, again, is something that's come through quite strongly in our data. And in many ways, when you look at the recession we've had and the subsequent recovery, a lot of what we're seeing at the moment is a bit of a one-off. What we've seen is a quite unique recession where both demand and supply was suppressed. And what we're seeing is as that bounces back as the economy reopened after the end of lockdown, that has had a sort of distortive impacts, whereas demand's bounced back really quickly, while supply hasn't really kept up. And we're seeing that in terms of supply shortages, also staff shortages as well. On top of that, you've seen some of the structural changes that have been caused by COVID and also Brexit, where in the labour market, for example, in particular, the amount of labour available has gone down. In terms of Brexit, people have left because of Brexit. Also, people have left because of COVID, both overseas workers, also domestic workers as well. We've seen particularly older workers actually leave the market during COVID, and there's no sign of them actually coming back into the labour markets. Again, that has created more structural issues, which is just some of the issues we're seeing at the moment is a bit more longer term. And some of the other sort of challenges our surveys also highlighted is get some of the legacy impacts from COVID. So cash flows is another lagging indicator. While some of the headline indicators of business activity have improved, cash flow is still an issue. So we're still seeing a lot of businesses, particularly at the smaller end, struggling with repairing their balance sheets post-COVID. And on top of that, we're also seeing a lot of businesses have taken on a lot of debt over the last couple of years as well, due to COVID as well, because that again is having an impact on their ability to rebound and recover. Having said that, we are seeing the recovery. I think what we've seen over the past year when the economy unlocked, we saw the easy part of the recovery. When people unlocked, people went to the restaurant for the first time. So it's an easy part. What we're in at the moment is sort of the hard yards, getting back to sort of pre-COVID levels of output. And that's going to be a real challenge. What we're also seeing, I guess, when we do chambers across the country is quite an uneven picture as well. We look at a local level. You mentioned where it's West Midlands, but there's other parts of countries as well, where sectors that have been most damaged by the pandemic, such as consumer-focused services, are actually struggling to bounce back a little bit compared to maybe other parts of the country where other sectors are more pronounced. What we're also seeing is a growing concern around, I guess, government complacency around the strength of the recovery. So while the government and the Bank of England were rightly lauded for what they introduced last year, like the furlough scheme, which was hugely successful, and we went a lot further than a lot of other international countries. What we're seeing at the moment is that the UK is probably one of the first countries, industrial countries, to actually remove support to the economy. And that's quite concerning given where we are, given some of the sort of tentative nature and slowing down in recovery that was highlighted in the report. So again, it's something we need to watch out quite closely. You mentioned levelling up. Again, as you can imagine, it's quite a hot topic for chambers across the UK. And in many ways, you mentioned about defining levelling up. As we hear a lot about that from chambers across the UK, it's almost been stuck in sort of a political soundbite as opposed to practical reality. And you speak to chambers across the UK, I don't really know what levelling up actually means. Is it north versus south, east versus west? No one really knows. And I think that's a real challenge. From the chambers perspective, generally what we hear is more around sort of dealing with deprivation, inequality, where you see it, be it in some of the richest boroughs in London, for example, there's sort of high degrees of poverty. So that's one of the things we need to bottom out quite closely. And I agree, infrastructure is one element of it, but also skills and accessing finance as well, the crucial parts of the levelling up. I do agree from Birmingham in particular, that there's lots of reasons to be optimistic. HS2, of course, is a real one. I mean, we are concerned about not necessarily phase one, but the further phases of HS2 being completed. That's a real key critical element. Well, I think there's also opportunities. You mentioned Commonwealth Games. Again, that's another interesting area. And I guess putting this all together, there's a spending review and budget next week. What we'd like to see is that to be sort of a real sort of stamp in the ground from the government to say that they're going to sort of stick behind all these key priorities, like levelling up. So looking levelling up, there needs to be really firm these big infrastructure projects. Some of HS2 being delivered in full. It's going to be really important for the recovery. So that's again general point. I think things are looking optimistic, but things are getting a bit more challenging in the next few months with high inflation, recruitment difficulties. But overall, a really strong picture. I think what we're seeing in the report is echoed across the country, really. And I think that's encouraging, but of course, there's still some challenges that need to be addressed. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. And Abigail.
Yes, thank you, Steve. And thank you to the Chambers, certainly for all your support in the last year. And also thank you to Simon and team for this report, because for us as a local business, as well as a global business, the data is really key in terms of understanding how we respond to the market and how we want to operate as well. So these reports are invaluable to us. We've actually on HS2, we've certainly felt the impact for some time of HS2 in various different forms. And prior to the pandemic, some of the announcements with some of the infrastructure projects, key infrastructure projects in our country, with HS2, slowing down, being put on hold, and of course changes to airport policy as well, has really impacted us locally. For Arup, our strengths here are certainly in the Midlands, and in Birmingham it's actually in the infrastructure project work. So that was quite a big impact for us. And then to go into the pandemic as well, we certainly had some challenges. But we're very, very resilient and highly skilled. My colleagues very, very highly skilled. And so we've responded to this by working with our partners, working in collaboration with others, and using our skills to deploy and support in response to COVID and the pandemic, and certainly locally. So we've certainly seen a shift now, and we're certainly optimistic in terms of the future and what we're seeing here in Birmingham as well. We've actually got the problem now of being too busy, which is a nice problem to have. But one point that I wanted to pick up on what Simon and Sarah mentioned is about shortages and skill shortages. We're acutely seeing that here in Birmingham, and it certainly does concern me as a leader as well. So we are certainly responding to that, which I can talk a bit more about later. But in terms of upskilling, internally, we've developed some programs over the last couple of years to upskill and respond to the existing context as well, the climate change response, and indeed the COVID response. So we've got programs around digital and also around carbon agenda and sustainability as well, and social value. So that's not just for specific staff, it's for all of our staff to be upskilling and working with partners like the university and like local schools as well, to actually help upskill alongside us for those that we work with and we work for. So that's absolutely vital, but we do have a general view of optimism here locally in Birmingham. And actually, as a global company, we're trying to bring our global support and skills to help bolster the local economy as well. And that comes down to working with our ethos of collaboration and through partnership, both with public and private sector bodies here in Birmingham.
Excellent. Thank you very much. I hope this microphone's working, by the way. Good. So thank you, everybody. So I've just got a few questions to ask before I hand over to the audience, both online and here in the auditorium. Simon, can I start with you? In the report, you talked about we look ahead to regain our growth momentum. We need to attract the best talent. We produce about 150,000 graduates a year from the 5 universities in Birmingham in the area. How can we retain that talent within our city? And we've also looked at the current problems the BBC have, for example, about bringing people in from London into Birmingham. So how can we sustain that talent and keep them within the city?
Check this is working. Thanks. That's a good question. So for the University of Birmingham, graduate retention in the region has increased over the last 6 years from around, I think, 35% of our students stayed in the region to work, and it's gone up to over 50 now. So graduate retention in itself is an indicator of attractiveness. This is a place graduates want to live, and it's an indicator that there are jobs for graduates. But graduates from Russell Group universities aren't the be-all and end-all of this. So in some senses, we've got to think about the whole portfolio of education, from degree to NVQ4 and below, and upskill across that. And I think one of the things we can do to retain is do a better job of connecting the education system to the needs of firms. And there are some really interesting initiatives happening on that front, which is to do with internships and a number of firms also taking on board lower skilled individuals and deliberately investing in upskilling them so that they get access to the diversity of our region. So that's the first thing, I think, retention. The second thing is attracting talent, and I think talent goes where firms go. So there's a cycle here. If you attract a Goldman Sachs, which we've done, or before that an HSBC, we saw before the pandemic that we were pulling up a number of high-skilled individuals with whatever qualifications they had from the London environment and elsewhere into our region. Now that's stalled, and I think Goldman Sachs are here. Goldman Sachs, in a digital skills roundtable I chaired last week, said they need 4,000 coders. 4,000 coders for putting in this building at the end of the square here. So that's a massive challenge for them, and we need to help them across the region as stakeholders attract those skills again from London and elsewhere, as well as retain those skills in the region. So working with businesses is key.
Thank you. Thanks, Simon. Deborah, now we were next door a few weeks ago to HSBC, and we had a roundtable there, and you talked about something which was really interesting, which was intentional repurposing in the context of the economic recovery for the city. Could you comment on intentional repurposing and what that means?
Yeah, I was a bit troublesome at that meeting, if I remember correctly, because it was with a number of our colleagues from the investment and development community, and they were talking about let's wait and see. And I challenged them on that and said, well, actually, we're at a moment here, and we could wait and see, but actually what I think is more important for this city and supporting its growth is being quite intentional about how we physically repurpose the city, but more importantly, how we repurpose economic growth and support for businesses. And I'll give you an example of what we're trying to do as a city council, as an example of that repurposing. We've got the challenge of recovering from COVID, but we've also got the bigger challenge about achieving carbon neutrality by 2030, which I think is ambitious and aspirational. And we can only do it if we work hand in hand with businesses. So one of the intentions that we have is working with the other two cities in the region, pooling our social housing. So that means about 160,000 homes potentially, and putting that on the market. Now, if we do that, we will disrupt the market. We will absolutely disrupt the market. And we're working with Simon Marks there at the back of the room, who's been brilliant in supporting, in kind of reining us in a bit, because we're very, Martin Reeves, Tim Johnson and I, we kind of want the moon really. And Simon's trying to moderate our expectations. But what we're trying to do is create an ecosystem of achieving carbon neutrality by putting our homes on the market for retrofitting. Now, we're not going to achieve that unless we work with businesses to create the supply chain. Now, I would love that supply chain to be in this city and in this region, and even in this country, but I think that we're going to be challenged by that, and we might need to look globally. I haven't spoken to you about this, David, but what we also need to support this is working with our universities to accelerate that R&D and that innovation, because many of you will have heard on the news recently that there isn't the supply of deep, heat source pumps. There aren't the skills to deliver those. There isn't the kind of innovation and the tech available at the scale that we will need over the next few years. So it is about working with universities, it's about working with our further education colleges, it is about being purposeful about creating a curriculum that delivers those skills that we need in order to retrofit those 160,000 homes. And then, of course, it's working with DIT and government about trying to capture that global investment that we will also need to support this as well. So there's a real ecosystem that we are intentionally kind of developing and putting out into the market. But we can only do that by working with businesses and helping and supporting businesses look at new technologies, digital responses, etc., to achieve that. And I'm not prepared to sit and wait, actually, because if we do, 2030 will come and go, and we've still got the big challenge that we've got. So that's one example of being intentional.
Thank you. And you weren't disrupted at the meeting at all. It was great. Saran, I'd like to ask you about recent data. We've heard also from Simon about the pace of economic growth has slowed. So how can we ensure that economic growth is sustained as we emerge and come through the pandemic?
Yeah, it's absolutely right. The economic data is showing us a slowing economy. Part of that was expected because we saw a big bounce back as the economy reopened. That was always going to slow, but we're also seeing headwinds coming in, like supply shortages, like staff shortages, high inflation, and that sort of thing. I mean, I think there's probably about 4 key areas we need to look at. I think the first one is the business environment more generally. I think what we've seen over the past year, and particularly over the past few months, is a move to the government to create more onerous business environments. We've seen obviously input costs go up. We're also going to be seeing a sharp rise in national insurance coming in next financial year. Corporation tax is going to go up quite a lot in 2023. And that doesn't signal that this is a great place to do business and try to get business domestically to invest, but also internationally to invest as well. I think that needs to be looked at as well. But it also covers things like skills, creating good ecosystem for skills, dealing some long-standing issues like around business rates. Again, doing all these issues. We think the focus of the government should be on that. The second area is around, I mentioned earlier, levelling up. And that's, again, a key area because having a recovery is only good if it's a broad-based recovery that everyone feels the benefit of that. So that's going to be really important. And that is, again, around sort of financing, but also around skills as well. I think the other two areas is around sort of maximising opportunities. So you mentioned the transition to net zero. That's a really good opportunity to get business to innovate and invest. But again, government needs to give business the headroom to invest because we poll our members on this across the country. And one thing that they do say is one of the barriers to them transitioning to net zero is the high upfront cost of doing so. So looking at financing opportunities to help businesses smooth the way. So I think there's a real will out there, but it's just the process in between that's going to be a real challenge. And also, I think another sort of area is around sort of international trade. That again is an area as well, because that can often drive great innovation. Of course, there's near-term issues with Brexit, which the government may maybe look at providing more support there. We're also looking at branching out to new markets as well. So looking at what can be done to provide more practical trade support to businesses. You want to go and see a trade show sort of post-Brexit, want to go to new markets, meet new suppliers, that sort of thing. I think those sort of things will help sort of sustain the recovery, deal with some near-term issues, but also maximise opportunities.
Excellent. Thank you. Thanks very much. Abigail, now you talked about Arup being a national and an international company. So what have been the key challenges for Arup on the economic recovery, and how has Arup dealt with those?
I think initially some of the key challenges, and we're still facing it, is to do with our people. Our people are Arup, and I think we've all faced this. We've been focused on well-being, health and well-being, and Deborah's mentioned mental health, and we still continue to have that as a focus. Is we want people to be well and have a good quality of life, and for us, we've seen some real difficulties, whether it be those affected by childcare or our young staff as well, house sharing and trying to work in this environment. So that for us has been quite a challenge, and how we work as well. As a company, we'd already piloted a flexible working policy, both actually it wasn't in the Midlands, but Liverpool and in Australia, and we just accelerated that programme, Work Unbound. And that has been really well received by staff to actually work a lot more flexibly in this environment as well. And also, I think more generally, is just remaining positive. That has been a huge challenge for us individually and as a company as well. So for our employees to have a very clear global strategy that we implement locally as well has helped give people a bit more certainty, a bit more security. And also for us, a lot of, we thrive on innovation and challenge, actually, and responding to that challenge. So we've tried to inspire staff and use our skills in a different way to, some of our business areas we're in much more commonly working, say, in housing, or as I said earlier, in infrastructure. And now we're adapting our skills and our knowledge to work on some of the newer challenges, whether it be to do with responding in healthcare to COVID or to do with climate change as well. So for us, we're trying to use what we're facing and these challenges we're facing in a positive way to respond and apply ourselves in different ways, really, which I believe is going well. But we still have a long way to go, but we do have some positive news about our move, for example, which is really inspiring us, and to think about what that's going to look like collectively with partners as well.
Excellent, thank you very much. Simon, can I use the B word, Brexit, and ask you to what extent that is impacting on recovery? I think it's around 40% of West Midlands manufacturing is exported into the European Union. And is that putting a brake on our recovery, or can we look forward to global Britain with confidence?
I certainly think we can look forward to global Britain. Its manufacturing is likely to play a less role in that in some respects, but you're absolutely right. Part of the reason the region got impacted is that in GVA terms, in terms of the number of enterprises, not necessarily employees, but number of enterprises, manufacturing is very dominant, the second largest sector after business and professional financial services. So there's data in the report showing how important it is, particularly through the supply chains locally, and how multiplier effects, I'm making a funny noise, how multiplier effects from that to small firms are important for low income communities. But the fact remains, so we have data on the fact that the trade imbalance grew quite radically. We are now spending a lot more on imports and earning a lot less from our exports. That's partly inflation and currency. It's also because of supply chain problems. Now, supply chain problems are hitting everybody globally, but Brexit seems to accentuate the problem for us and has certainly slowed down the movement of goods in and out of the country. So it's a problem. I think a lot of that's a temporary problem. I think we'll overcome it. But I think trade needs to be thought of in terms of more advanced manufacturing, energy technologies, but also we need to focus an awful lot of efforts on our creative, cultural and digital, because we're really, really good in those areas, those service areas. It's not physical goods, but we make a huge amount of money from exporting those services. So I mean, Brexit is a political problem that's caused an economic dilemma, but I think that challenge should be short-lived, and we should see firms adapting quite quickly to it. But there are additional bigger global challenges, trade friction between the US and China, for example, that could pull the rug out from that. So it's not all plain sailing. Again, my advice is not just to think about manufacturing for the region, but think about when manufacturing is going to go and what new industries we can develop that will perform really well in terms of exports. I think that's a key issue.
Just a supplemental on that one, in terms of a gigafactory, I think we're looking for a significant investment from the government into that, in terms of Coventry and around that area. How vital is it that we get that gigafactory here in the Midlands?
I think it's very important. I mean, I was actually on a call with our Chancellor, Karen Billy-Morey, who's president of the CBI, yesterday on clusters and the role of universities in clusters. And a gigafactory would fit very, very neatly within what we have here already. We have a fantastic legacy of automotive engineering skills, some fantastic companies, but it's the smaller, very entrepreneurial, high-tech firms that feed into Formula One as well as the mass producers of cars that would benefit hugely from having a gigafactory in the infrastructure around new low-carbon automotive technologies. So, but you also need to think about a range of other clusters that we have nascent capabilities in. Gigafactory does relate to space and aerospace, and it relates to other forms of transport. We have a fantastic rail, hydrogen rail centre at the university, and we have fantastic technologies in cold storage for energy. And we have life sciences and health. Now, gigafactories and digital are two things that will span across a lot of those different areas, and we need to focus on that portfolio.
Thank you. Deborah, one thing you're passionate about is young people. When you talk about young people, they have been hit hardest in the economy and through the pandemic. What is the City Council doing, and what can they do to get access to meaningful employment for our young people?
So I think this is really important, and we launched a report called Breaking Down Barriers, and Ilgun's here, who was responsible for co-authoring that. And we spent quite a lot of time doing research, talking to young people. One of the stark issues for us is that over 77% of the 2,000 young people we spoke to said that they were experiencing high levels of anxiety, fear for their futures, and fearing that aspiration and opportunity had been lost to them as a result of COVID. So it's a very real kind of issue and challenge for us as a city council. And we're working really closely with many of you in this room, actually, about how we can try and address that. We're working with places like Goldman Sachs, and I think it's fine for Goldman Sachs to say we need high-level coders, but actually they need lots of other skills as well that we shouldn't ignore. And there needs to be a much closer relationship with our further education kind of institutions to ensure that they're putting on the right kind of skills courses to meet the demands. And this has been a problem that I've certainly seen over the 30 years that I've been working, that we seem incapable of meeting the needs of businesses and being a little bit ahead of the curve and anticipating what skills are going to be needed, and then making sure that our young people are fully equipped and skilled up to take advantage of those. And, it was, 30 years ago when we were building the International Convention Centre and the NIA, the construction companies were shipping people in from Europe because they couldn't find people with the right skills. And we need to avoid that happening again as the economy shifts, we move to digital, and we take advantage of some of those great opportunities that are around. So as a council, we're doing things like, we want a citywide mentoring scheme, we want enhanced work experience. We're working with the DWP in particular because they want to work with Birmingham to address some of the high levels of unemployment. We need a different careers service. Our young people are still not advised properly and appropriately, I don't think. And of course, we've got to work with you to make sure that whatever we develop and support meets your needs. And again, that dialogue needs to be far better on that. One of the things I would say is that I also think there's a real ticking time bomb in this city. So, and you've heard me talk about this, Simon, about the levels of early years provision is not right, and a third of our under fours are not school ready. And what that means is that at the age of 4, they can't speak properly, they've got poor social interaction skills, some of them are still being presented at school in nappies. And that disadvantage is going to remain with those young people throughout all of their education career. So the point at which you want to pick them up to provide jobs, we're having to compensate for the fact that some of them still can't read and write properly at the age of 17, 18. So there is something that we need to think about. We need to think about it as a system, not just skills provision for our 18, 19-year-olds. It needs to happen much earlier on in that system. And it's something personally that I'm going to be quite loud about and relentless about, because I do think it's a ticking time bomb. If we really want to take our position as a global city, with a vibrant economy, we can't ignore that. The other thing I would say is that, you talked about the inflationary pressures that we're seeing as well, and the City Council has just press the button on providing free school meals for our kids over half term, because, you know, it's not right in this city that there are literally households that are having to make decisions about whether to heat their homes or feed their children. So whilst I'm really excited about the opportunities, it's absolutely, you know, it is the most exciting place to work at the moment. We can't ignore the fact that there are still sections of our communities that are really struggling.
Thank you. And that leads into questions surrounding how can we ensure that coming through out of this this that we've had through coronavirus, that through the recovery we can see meaningful prosperity in all communities, so it's evenly shared in terms of the recovery.
Yeah, that's really a critical question, really, because it's all well having sort of strong headline GDP, but actually what really matters is the stories behind it, and that is prosperity and make sure that's evenly distributed across the country. And in many ways, it is linked to jobs. And the sort of Prime Minister is right when he says that we want to have a high skill, high wage economy, which will deliver that sort of prosperity. The question is, how do you get there? How do you make it sustainable rather than just stoking higher inflation? And I think one of the key areas, and it was touched upon in Deborah's answer, is around sort of skills. Upskilling people is really important. The BCC recently published a report from their Workplace Training Development Commission, which is based on chambers across the UK, and that showed a number of key areas of action. One of the areas is looking to boost national skills funds, try and again increase sort of training critical areas like in technical education. I mean, that's sort of should be the focus. And of course, many of these challenges are not COVID related. They may have been exacerbated by COVID, but they were there beforehand. So things like recruitment difficulties, lack of skills, disparity across the UK. These have been long-standing challenges that still haven't been addressed. I think that needs to be a clear focus as we move past COVID.
Thank you. And talking about skills gap, Abigail, I mean, has Arup faced challenges in skills gap, and what have you done to try and get the right people into your organisation?
Yes, we have a couple that spring to mind, particularly mentioned a bit today already, is I think not just here in Birmingham, but nationally and certainly internationally as well, is there's that sort of deep understanding of sustainable development. Those sort of skills around that are fairly scarce, let's say, in supply, and a deeper understanding of really the net zero carbon challenge and how we respond to that. I mean, for us, and certainly here in Birmingham, with the diversity and the huge young population as well, we just are continuing that ongoing commitment to the early career group. And I mean, and here in the Midlands, we've just recently as well, we've recruited 40 into the Midlands this year out of 300 in the UK. So quite a significant amount of our early careers group coming here in the Midlands, which is very positive. But and also actually our national early careers group team is headed up here in Birmingham, which I'm really positive with that as well. But we're having to do a lot more, and we have been doing this for several years, but we're really stepping up now as that engagement with the universities regionally, and actually talking about a much more longer term relationship, not just with the universities of Birmingham, but other universities in the West Midlands as well. And working with actually our internal Arup university, because unusually we do have a university internally, and that develops programmes of education for our staff within as well, because we're wanting to retain staff, show people a clear career path, show them more options as well. And so we've really invested heavily in our internal training, not just our external reach out to educational partners, and apprenticeships. We've increased our apprenticeships as well. But we have things also, the digital and data skills, which I mentioned already, but we've invested in heavily in a data fellowship, and also a broader STEM programme as well locally. But I think the key is as well linking the local level with the global skills that we've got. So we've developed and enhanced actually, I think, our global skills networks and global skills leaderships to help us from within and externally as well build skills for everyone. So yeah, we're doing a lot, but it's still very challenging, definitely.
Thank you, Abigail. Well, there's enough questions from me. So have we got any questions from the audience? Yes, over there. Swing a mic over to you.
Okay. Sorry, it's my name from the Birmingham Economic. It's run as a bit of a disconnect in the sense that we've got unemployment in Birmingham stubbornly high, across the West Midlands stubbornly high, particular, amongst young people in particular. A fantastic opportunity, or a number of opportunities, just to around that, particularly around climate change and the retrofitting of our housing stock across the region. I wonder what the panel thinks about how we can be as deliberate about this and actually go and say, well, it's not good enough to let it happen without it being done by local people, by connecting people to those jobs, giving the opportunities for functional training, so high-level degree apprenticeships, and also on the manufacturing side, when we talk about heat pumps, they're going to be manufactured overseas. So why don't we just say, as well as having a gigabyte factory in the region, why don't we have these heat pump factory in the country, supply those heat pumps for the UK from this region?
Deborah, you were nodding, so I want to answer that.
Mind you, I talk flippantly about heat source, but I've got no idea how they work. So I mean, but all I know is that you need. All I know is that you need one to retrofit your house. So you're absolutely right, and I mean, but part of this plan that Simon is helping us to develop and refine is exactly about that. You know, if we want to be intentional and we want to develop this, it's got to be an ecosystem. And you can't, you know, if local businesses and local people are going to benefit from this, we have to be absolutely clear and intentional about how we do that. So this is clearly about our own further education colleges, our own universities doing the R&D and helping us come up with the solutions. And I'm in no doubt that certainly, you know, the University of Birmingham that I'm kind of involved with will have a number of spin-out companies of, you know, PhD students who are just desperate. Well, Birmingham City University as well. You know, I'm not being. I love them all. I love you all. But you know, I mean, no doubt there will be spin-out where you know, our brilliant minds, our young brilliant minds are really onto this already, really. And then we need to engender that, we need to, you know, support it, and we need to enable it to happen. But we also need to be intentional about the people that are skilled, need to be local people coming through our own skills infrastructure and our own education infrastructure as well. But you're absolutely right. With that amount of housing potentially going onto the market, it will sustain our own kind of manufacturing base to do that. And that's exactly what we should be doing. And I did talk about a global supply chain because the local and domestic supply chain isn't there. And can we wait? Can we wait to develop that when the need is so urgent? And the reality is we need to do both, don't we? But yeah, absolutely. You know, and if there is a will in the room, I believe that we can do that.
Thank you. I should also point out that if anybody's watching on the live stream, if you put it in the chat, I'd get it on my screen here so we can still answer questions if you're watching remotely. But let's go to the next person, the lady over there, please.
Hi, Pam Waddle from the Innovation Alliance for the West Midlands. I absolutely love this idea of intentional repurposing. As you know, Deborah, we've been advocating for many years, it's demand-led innovation, and really that's what we're creating as a innovation. And I think it's important, obviously the universities and everybody's important, but if you articulate these challenges correctly, then you get a real response from businesses, and they might be more short-term immediate responses. And maybe in the areas, not just in housing and public health and all sorts of areas. So I'd like to see the City Council developing its way, articulating its demands in a way that businesses see it as a business opportunity. And that gets very quickly. We've seen our businesses responding to the COVID challenge. We can get them to respond to the carbon challenge as well.
That's brilliant. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you also to HS2. You touched upon the idea, Steve, that people did want to move here from BBC, which is obviously a big issue. Everyone's talked about that. What no one's talked about is that the reason they would have taken a 10k pay cut to do so. We are seeing, or I'm personally seeing, talking to people in the city, that we're seeing not a skills gap, but people moving from one company to the next. Sorry. With wages. What we're asking for is a high skilled economy, but we're not offering the wages to match London or the other cities, when actually the price of living in Birmingham is getting higher. Are we going to see a change from businesses to offer those higher paid roles to attract that talent and retain it?
Abigail, I think that's one for you.
I can certainly have a go. I mean, yes, to some extent we've seen some of that pattern going on in the market here locally. I do agree with that, and we've been thinking about this ourselves. It's some of the feedback, I mean, certainly about some as well, the data and information is quite key. So we've been exploring, why are people moving, and quite often it's combined with seeing that clear career path, seeing that support with training, as well as the wages as well. So yes, we're certainly as a business, I can't speak for others, but committed to ensuring the wages are fair and support people and the high quality of life here and also in our Nottingham office in the Midlands as well. But it's also about, having a positive environment to work in, actually developing yourself individually and ensuring an all-rounded experience as well is quite key in the feedback we're getting. And one of the drivers for us moving and still continuing positively to land here in Birmingham and follow through with our move commitment. It's our third largest Arab office in the world. It's going to be 1,000 staff. But one of the, 3 key reasons why we're doing it is actually about connecting more closely with clients, but also strengthening, our ethos around collaboration, creating a place. Strengthening that collaboration with partners here in Birmingham is absolutely key, and that's what our staff want as well. They want the opportunity to work with others, not just in one company, and embracing the talent. We were struggling to attract talent in certain locations, and so being here in the heart of the city is really key to us to offer, more opportunities to create a much more diverse workforce as well, and actually be reflective of the local population. And we're responding to staff asking for that as well. So city centre locations are key. The footfall's certainly gone down in city centres, and we want to try and help contribute to bringing that up again. So we're really excited. I want to start tomorrow here in the city centre. So we're doing that in temporary locations instead, and offering that opportunity for staff as well.
Thank you.
Can I just pick that up just briefly, Steve? Is that all right? I mean, I think it's an excellent question, and I think it goes to the heart of what is slightly a structural problem nationally with the UK. We've developed a bit of a dependence on low-skilled, low-income cohorts in certain sectors and in certain places. Brexit and other events have taken that away. So we're on a 20-year high for unfilled vacancies nationally. So 1.1 million people, vacancies that are open and unfilled. Part of that's a skills gap, but part of the skills gap originates from the problem that structurally businesses have not invested themselves in skills as much as our European counterparts. Secondly, they've not invested a lot in capital goods and automation. We're less automated than the South Koreans, the Japanese, the Germans, and the French. So in a sense, if the cost of labour goes up, then one would hope cyclically firms will invest more in that labour, improve the skills, but also improve productivity by doing other things to innovate. And if that pressure continues, it should move us, whether we like it or not, into being a slightly more higher skilled, higher income, and probably more fair in terms of our inclusivity. So structurally, I think these are good things. It's just the challenge, if we don't respond to that, means we could get stuck and not adapt and move those firms up the value chains that they need to move up.
So just come on that as well, because I think it's a really interesting point, interesting question. I think the question is how sustainable high wages is going to be long term, given all the some cost pressures businesses are facing. So I think often policymakers look at wages in isolation, but actually from a business perspective, and you look at a broader based view of it, but all the other costs. For example, the cost of employing someone is going up, with national insurance rising next year. So that again is another cost for employing someone, paying someone. I think looking at it more longer term, I think it's important. But ultimately, sustaining higher wages is about getting higher productivity. get more value out of that person, which again goes back to the skills point we talked about earlier.
So I think it's also about challenge, isn't it? I would have thought as well. So we had a visit from a global chief executive of one of the major investors and developers who are investing in the city, and he's really excited about the site and wants to make it a global exemplar for his company. And my challenge to him is, well, of course we want that globally recognised development, which is green and sustainable and beautiful and enables living in a way in which people are demanding at the moment. But that doesn't come cheap, and if you want the best, you need to pay for that, really. But equally, our part of the bargain is that we've got to supply those skills that this company is going to need in order to develop this beautiful community in the heart of the city. So, but I was very clear to him that, if you want to come to the city and do this, and of course we want you to, you can't do it on the cheap and expect to have cheap labour. So you've got to work with us and invest with us and help us create the skills base that you need.
We've got time for one more question. Yes, gentleman over there.
It's Lisa from the Birmingham. Just a quick point on we did some work with the Social Mobility Commission and the Department of Education. We found that one of the key barriers to access to high quality and high opportunities in skills is that there's a lack of access to these opportunities, particularly when it comes to low-income communities in Birmingham. And one of the sort of 5 pillars that we came up with was the fact that we need to show that there's a vast amount of opportunities. We need to show that these opportunities have progression, that they provide the skills for that progression to happen, and also that the fact that there's job security, particularly as we're coming out of a pandemic. And that's what by the least, that there's an opportunity to earn money as you go along. There seems to be a bit of a disconnect between what industry can offer and what early talent is looking for. Is this something that is seen all the time as well?
Again, it's a great question, and it's that barrier. I mean, Anne Green, Professor Anne Green, is a skills expert at City Ready and has explored this for many, many years. It's this barrier to entry. The university does a huge amount in this area in terms of accessibility to degree programs, but what we've started to do is branch out, as have others, including colleges and other education providers, which is to work with businesses on getting access to undereducated and non-educated and diverse individuals within the city region. So last week, the university launched the Birmingham Future Digital Programme, and that is working with HSBC, PwC, and a number of others to offer entry grade jobs to NEETs, not in education, not in employment, and to focus on communities in the region that would never come across either a Russell Group university, will never go down to Edgbaston, but also don't understand what it is that the HSBCs and PwCs do and where their entry point might be. And Matt Hammond, who's the lead partner at PwC, made a very interesting comment, which was quite challenging to university academics, which was his early experience of people from those backgrounds is they've got tremendous entrepreneurship, incredibly clever, incredibly hardworking, but a sort of savvy, a street savvy that he said we need in our organisation, and we haven't traditionally looked to those individuals to bring in. Companies like that exploring those sorts of access points, and in his words, using influencers in the region to get access to those communities. We're in an early stage and we're learning as we go, but I think it's a critical point to sort of remove some of these barriers to access, particularly in this region.
More comments from you? Excellent. Thank you. Well, with that, I would like to thank panelists today. In particular, Simon Collinson, well done, Simon, Deborah Cadman, Suren Thiru, and Abigail Broomfield. I'd like to thank Professor Sir David Eastwood for being our host today. Thank you very much, Sir David. Everybody in the room has a copy of the report. If you're not in the room, then the publication can be found on www.greaterbirminghamchambers.com, which is the Chamber website. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you for being here and have a great day.